In 2018, a Marin County family had a surprise when they found a baby bobcat crying stuck in a tree on their San Elmo property. Jennifer said they first heard the young bobcat's cries early Saturday morning around 6:45 a.m. Following the sound to an old oak tree, she discovered the tiny bobcat kitten perched 15 feet above the ground, clinging desperately to a trembling branch. It was alone, frightened, and crying for help, with no mother in sight, and the kitten growing weaker. Jennifer and her husband faced a difficult choice. They knew they had to act, but their decision to help was only the beginning. What they discovered next would reveal that this wasn't just about one stranded bobcat kitten. It was the start of a rescue that became something far more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning mist hung low over the hills of San Elmo, California as Jennifer Bryn Barbie stepped onto her back deck with a steaming cup of coffee. It was 6:30 a.m. on a crisp Saturday in April 2018, and the world was just beginning to wake. The redwoods at the edge of their property stood like silent sentinels, their branches disappearing into the fog. Jennifer loved these quiet moments before the day truly began, when the only sounds were the chirping of early birds and the distant hum of Highway 101. But this morning was different. Strange plaintive cry pierced the morning stillness. Jennifer froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. The sound came again. High-pitched, desperate, almost like a baby's wail. Her heart began to race as she sat down her mug and listened intently. "Todd," she called back into the house. "Come out here. Something's wrong." Her husband emerged moments later, still in his pajamas and rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What is it, Jen?" "Listen," she whispered. The cry came again, clearer this time, from somewhere near the old oak tree that bordered their property and the wild hillside beyond. Todd's expression shifted from sleepy confusion to alert concern. "That sounds like an animal in distress," he said, already moving toward the stairs that led down to the yard. Together, they followed the sound, their bare feet growing cold on the dew-soaked grass. The cries grew louder as they approached the massive oak, its gnarled branches reaching out like arthritic fingers. Jennifer grabbed Todd's arm and pointed upward. There, about 15 feet up, clinging to a branch that seemed far too thin for comfort, was a tiny bobcat kitten. "Oh my God," Jennifer breathed. "It's just a baby." The kitten couldn't have been more than 4 weeks old. Its spotted fur was fluffed out in fear. Tiny claws dug deep into the bark. Its blue eyes, still holding that kitten blue that would later turn yellow, were wide with terror. Every few seconds, it would open its mouth and let out another heartbreaking wail. How did it even get up there? Todd wondered aloud, circling the tree to get a better view. Jennifer's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. "We have to help it. It's probably been there all night. Where's its mother?" They scanned the surrounding area, but there was no sign of an adult bobcat. The morning was growing lighter, and with it came the realization that this tiny creature was truly alone and in desperate need of help. "I'll call Wild Care," Jennifer said, already heading back to the house for her phone. Wild Care in San Rafael was the local wildlife rehabilitation center, and surely they would know what to do. But It was still only 6:45 a.m. The recorded message informed her that the office didn't open until 8:30. "They're closed," she reported back to Todd, who was still standing guard beneath the tree, as if his presence might somehow comfort the stranded kitten. "Try Marin Humane Society," he suggested. "They might have an emergency line." Jennifer's fingers flew over her phone screen. To her relief, she reached an on-call animal control officer named Mike Patterson, who listened patiently as she described the situation. "A bobcat kitten, you said, officer?" Patterson's voice was calm and professional. "How high up?" "About 15 feet. It's crying constantly." "Think it's been there a while." There was a pause on the other end. "Normally, we'd wait to see if the mother returns, but if the kitten is in distress and has been there overnight." "Do you folks have a pet carrier?" "Yes, we do. Our daughter's cat passed last year, but we still have all the supplies." "Good. Now, this is going to sound crazy, but if your husband is comfortable with it, he might be able to rescue the kitten himself. Bobcat kittens that young aren't particularly dangerous, but he'll need heavy-duty gloves, leather-work gloves at minimum. The technique is to grab it firmly by the scruff of the neck, just like a mother cat would carry her babies." Jennifer relayed the instructions to Todd, who looked up at the crying kitten with a mixture of determination and apprehension. "I can do it," he said, "but I'll need the ladder from the garage." The next 20 minutes were a flurry of activity. Todd retrieved their tallest ladder and his thickest work gloves while Jennifer prepared the carrier with some old towels. Their neighbor, Robert Chen, noticed the commotion and came over to help steady the ladder. "Never thought I'd see the day Todd Barbie became a bobcat rescuer," Robert joked, though his hands were steady on the ladder's base. Todd climbed slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones to the kitten. "It's okay, little one. I'm here to help. Just stay still for me." The kitten's cries intensified as Todd approached, and it tried to climb higher, but the branches above were too thin to support even its tiny weight. "Easy, easy," Todd murmured, reaching out slowly with one gloved hand. Jennifer held her breath as her husband's hand inched closer to the frightened animal. In one swift motion, Todd grasped the kitten firmly by the scruff of its neck. The kitten went limp, instinctively, responding to the hold its mother would use. "Got it," Todd called down, cradling the tiny creature against his chest as he carefully descended the ladder. The kitten was even smaller up close, no bigger than a domestic kitten, but with oversized paws that hinted at the powerful predator it would one day become. Its spotted coat was soft and fluffy, and despite its ordeal, it seemed uninjured. "Quick, the carrier," Todd said, and Jennifer held it open as he gently placed the bobcat inside. The kitten immediately huddled in the corner, no longer crying, but breathing rapidly, its whole tiny body trembling. "We need to get it to wild care as soon as they open," Jennifer said, checking her watch. It was now 7:30 a.m. "I'll drive," Todd offered, peeling off his gloves. "You call them again and let them know we're coming." The drive to San Rafael took 30 minutes, during which Jennifer sat in the back seat with the carrier, speaking softly to the frightened kitten. Occasionally, it would let out a small mew, and she found herself fighting back tears. How had this tiny creature ended up alone in their tree? What had happened to its mother? Wildcare's facility was just opening when they arrived. Allison Hermans, the director of animal care, met them at the door, her experienced eyes immediately assessing the carrier's occupant. "Oh, you brave little thing," she said, softly, carrying the carrier to an examination room. "Let's get you checked out." The examination revealed that the kitten was indeed about 4 weeks old, dehydrated, but otherwise healthy. It was a female, and despite her ordeal, she had a strong will to survive. "You did exactly the right thing," Allison told the Barbies. "A kitten this young wouldn't have survived much longer without help. We'll get her hydrated and fed, and then we'll work on reuniting her with her mother." But as Jennifer and Todd were preparing to leave, feeling good about their rescue, Allison received a phone call that changed everything. "We've just had another Bobcat kitten brought in," she told them after hanging. "Found less than a mile from your property. Same age, same condition." Jennifer and Todd exchanged glances. Siblings. Almost certainly, which means something has happened to their mother. Bobcats are excellent mothers. They don't abandon their young unless something is seriously wrong. The weight of this realization settled over the room. In the carrier, the tiny kitten had curled into a ball, finally sleeping after her traumatic night over. The next few days, Jennifer found herself calling Wild Care daily for updates. She learned that the 2 kittens, now confirmed to be sisters, had been placed together and were thriving. The staff had named them Maple and Oak after the trees where they were found. "They're eating well and getting stronger every day," Allison reported during one call. "We've set up a feeding schedule that mimics what their mother would have provided. They're starting to play together, which is a great sign." But attempts to locate and reunite them with their mother had failed. Trail cameras placed around both rescue sites showed no signs of an adult Bobcat. The harsh reality was that their mother was likely dead, possibly hit by a car on the nearby highway or killed by another predator. "What happens to them now?" Jennifer asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "They'll need to stay in captivity until they're old enough to survive on their own," Allison explained. "We're actually planning to transfer them to the Wildlife Center of Silicon Valley. They have better facilities for raising orphan bobcats and preparing them for eventual release." The transfer was scheduled for 2 weeks. After the rescue, Jennifer and Todd asked if they could visit the kittens before they left, and Allison agreed, recognizing the special bond that had formed during the rescue. The day of the visit was sunny and warm. In the rehabilitation sense nursery, Maple and Oak were in a large enclosure, designed to mimic their natural habitat. They had grown noticeably in just 2 weeks, their blue eyes beginning to show flecks of gold. "The one you rescued is Maple," Allison pointed out. "She's the slightly smaller one, but don't let that fool you. She's the feistier of the 2. As if to prove the point, Maple pounced on her sister, and the 2 tumbled together in a ball of spotted fur. It was hard to believe that just 2 weeks ago, Maple had been crying alone in a tree, separated from everything she knew. "They're teaching each other how to be bobcats," Allison explained. "Play fighting, stalking, all the skills they'll need in the wild. It's not ideal. Nothing replaces a mother's teaching, but they're adaptable creatures." Jennifer watched the kittens play, a lump forming in her throat. "Will they really be okay out in the wild? I mean, the Wildlife Center has an excellent Success rate with Bobcat rehabilitation. Allison assured her they'll spend the next several months in increasingly larger enclosures, learning to hunt live prey and avoid humans. By the time they're released at about 6 months old, they'll be fully equipped for life in the wild. The transfer to the Wildlife Center of Silicon Valley took place the next day. Jennifer and Todd weren't there to see it, but Allison called to let them know it had gone smoothly. The kittens had traveled well and were already exploring their new, larger enclosure. Over the following months, Jennifer received periodic updates through WildCare's newsletter. Maple and Oak were thriving, growing stronger and wilder with each passing week. Photos showed them progressing from playful kittens to sleek young cats, their spots fading as their adult coats came in. The Barbies' rescue story spread through their community, inspiring others to be more aware of the wildlife sharing their hillside neighborhoods. Robert Chen installed motion sensor cameras around his property and became an informal wildlife watcher. Other neighbors began leaving out water during the dry summer months and keeping their small pets indoors at dawn and dusk when bobcats were most active. 5 months after the rescue in September 2018, Jennifer received the call she'd been both anticipating and dreading. Maple and Oak are ready for release. The voice from the Wildlife Center informed her, "We wanted to invite you and your husband to be there. After all, you saved Maple's life." The release site was in the hills above Lexington Reservoir, chosen for its abundant prey, water sources, and distance from major roads. It was a crisp autumn morning when the Barbies arrived along with a small group of Wildlife Center staff and volunteers. The two transport carriers sat in the back of a pickup truck and Jennifer could hear movement inside. Her heart raced. Would Maple remember her? More importantly, had they successfully transformed from helpless kittens into wild predators? They're different cats now, the wildlife biologist warned gently. They've been taught to fear humans, which is essential for their survival. Don't expect any recognition or gratitude. That would actually be a bad thing. When the carriers were positioned at the edge of a meadow surrounded by oak woods, Jennifer and Todd stood back with the others. The doors were opened remotely, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then Oak emerged first, cautious but curious. She had grown into a beautiful young bobcat, her coat a tawny brown, with faint spots, her distinctive ear tufts fully developed. She paused at the carrier entrance, testing the air before bounding toward the treant with powerful, confident strides. Maple followed moments later, and Jennifer gasped softly. The tiny kitten from the tree had transformed into a magnificent wild creature. She moved with liquid grace, pausing only to look back once, not at the humans, but at her sister. Then she, too, disappeared into the forest. The group stood in silence for several minutes, listening to the rustling of leaves that marked the cat's passage deeper into their new territory. Jennifer found Todd's hand and squeezed it, tears streaming down her face. "They're going to be okay," she whispered. "Because of you," Todd replied, putting his arm around her. "Because we didn't just drive past that morning. Because we stopped to help." The wildlife biologist smiled at them. "You should know that these two have an excellent chance of survival. They're strong. They've bonded well, and they'll likely establish neighboring territories. In a year or two, they'll be raising kittens of their own. On the drive home, Jennifer and Todd were quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The morning's cries that had started this journey seemed like a lifetime ago. They had saved a life, too. Lives really, and in doing so had become part of the larger tapestry of conservation efforts that allowed wildlife and humans to coexist in the crowded San Francisco Bay Area. Back home, Jennifer stood on the same deck where she'd heard Maple's cries months earlier. The old oak tree stood unchanged, its branches reaching toward the sky. But now when she looked at it, she didn't see just a tree. She saw a reminder that sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be at exactly the right moment. That evening, as the sun set behind the Marin Hills, Jennifer thought she heard a distant call. Not the desperate cry of a kitten, but the confident yowl of an adult bobcat claiming its territory. She smiled, knowing that somewhere out there Maple and Oak were living their wild lives, free and fierce, just as nature intended. The rescue had changed. The Barbies, too. They became active supporters of wild care, volunteering for fundraisers and educational programs. Todd learned to build and install owl boxes to provide safe nesting sites for the barn owls that helped control the rodent population. Jennifer joined the wildlife tracking team, learning to identify tracks and scat, understanding the secret lives of the creatures that shared their hills. Year later, almost to the day of the rescue, Jennifer was again on her deck, with her morning coffee when movement caught her eye. A bobcat emerged from the tree and, padding silently across their yard. Was impossible to know for certain, but the cat seemed young, about the right age, with a slight build that reminded her of Maple. The bobcat paused near the old oak tree, looked up at the branch where Jennifer had first seen a crying kitten, then continued on its way, disappearing into the morning mist like a ghost. Jennifer didn't call out or try to follow. She simply stood there, coffee growing cold in her hands, grateful for the reminder that sometimes the most profound connections are the ones that set us free. The tiny kitten they had pulled from a tree had returned not as a pet or a friend, but as what she was always meant to be, a wild creature living on her own terms. A testament to the power of compassion and the resilience of nature. And in the end, that was the most speechless leaving part of all. Not just that a family had saved a baby bobcat, but that in doing so, they had become part of something larger, a community of people working to ensure that the wild heart of California continued to beat. One rescue, one release, one life at a time.